Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Everybody's Business from Bloomberg Businessweek. I'm Stacey Vanek Smith.
I'm Max Chafkin.
And this week, Max, all about eras.
Yeah, Stacey, the Elon era is ending in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about the deficit era, these gigantic deficits.
Not ending in Washington, D.C.
And my personal favorite era, the era of Taylor Swift owning her own music.
Yes, Taylor's version.
How are you, Stacey?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
So there's been all this talk about kind of macroeconomics right now. There's the deficit, there's the bond market, the dollar, and it's kind of left me a bit at a loss to figure out what to say beyond there's so much volatility right now.
Yeah, the Trump administration has been making all these big moves, which is shaking up big global macroeconomic markets. It's got people behaving in all kinds of really interesting ways. One of the ones that I have been tracking, and you know this, I love watching the price of gold.
Stacey is like, she's got her bars in her bunker.
That's right.
She's ready to end the Fed.
My go bag.
Exactly. The resident gold bug on Everybody's Business.
Well, what I find so fascinating about gold is it's one of those investments that is a little fringy, but it is something people gravitate to when there's a lot of uncertainty.
I mean, it is fringy in a way because, like, most people would not have it be, like, a major part of their portfolio unless you're watching, like, late-night infomercials. But in a other way, it's not fringy at all. It's kind of like the original investable asset.
No, that's very true. And the price of gold right now is at a record high, $3,500 an ounce almost, which is just kind of insane, but does sort of speak to this moment that we're in. And I actually wanted to sort of talk to people who maybe weren't in finance and investing about what their impression of gold is right now. So there is a museum exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum called Solid Gold, which tracks gold through the ages and our culture's relationship with gold. And so I asked people coming out of that exhibit, like, what they thought of gold and what their impression of gold was right now.
Gold, to me, it represents technique, skill. It really is a timeless metal. So
royalty. You know, that's a part of it.
Do you guys, like, invest in gold or own gold stuff?
No, gold is not my color, so I don't normally wear it. But
I do own a bit of gold, but that's mainly because of, like, parental pressure. I'm from India, so gold is seen as, like, stable. It's never going to go down in value.
I think gold is a pretty safe bet because, for some reason, it's always relevant.
Do you own gold? Do you invest in gold?
No, I don't. Now it's so expensive. I'm a musician, so I'll work and I won't work. It's not a steady job.
Do you have any gold records?
No, if I did, it would be a whole different story.
What do you think is like a safe place to put your money?
as far as investment, life experiences, coming to the Brooklyn Museum.
That's the kind of gold that you can't buy.
exactly.
I mean, great answer.
I know.
Can you just explain, like, why people are buying gold? Because the thing is, most people, their investments, whether it's real estate or stocks or life experience, those are also hedged against the price of the dollar.
That's a good point.
So why would you want to buy this, like, volatile asset that's hard to sell and that's kind of heavy?
Well, you're right in the short term that it's volatile, but over time, gold is probably one of the oldest stores of value. So
Royalty.
people have
like it.
Royalty.
Is one
People
thing.
like it. But I think at times when there's a lot of confusion over the value of stuff, so like stocks are doing well, but they've been way up and way down. The dollar people are worried about because of all the potential inflation, because of tariffs. There's been so much uncertainty in the Trump presidency with tariff policy, with global relationships, that I think people are just nervous. And gold is like a little safe haven. It's like this little bunker of value.
I think that the life experience guy is right.
You think going to the Brooklyn Museum is where the real gold is?
I feel like I might need to see this exhibit. All right, Stacey, let's talk about the one big, beautiful bill, 1,000+ pages, great name.
Yeah.
This bill, top line thing, extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts, which were supposed to expire. But then you have a bunch of other things. You have new tax cuts. You have cuts to Medicaid and food stamp programs to pay for the tax cuts. You have no tax on tips. You have some random trolley stuff that's just sort of thrown in there. Tax cut for gun silencers, preventing Medicaid dollars from going to Planned Parenthood. Then you have some kind of random Trump priorities that seem to have nothing to do with taxes. Golden Dome, funding for deportations, taxing college endowments, drilling on public lands, no more EV tax credits. It goes on and on, like I said, 1,000 pages. I wanted to talk about this.
That's a beefy bill.
Because it's a tax bill. But like you've been doing a lot of reporting on taxes and the way, I guess, people feel about them, what they mean for our budgets, our personal budgets, as well as our government budgets. And I kind of just wanted to get your take about what is in this bill, first of all, and like why it matters.
Well, first of all, it's kind of fascinating to hear you run through all the litany of stuff in the bill because it is formidable. I would say the crux of it is that this bill does extend the 2017 tax cuts, but the major concern here is how expensive it's going to be. It's going to add a lot to the deficit.
Hold that thought, because one thing I thought we could do, it seems like everyone's mad at this bill. So Elon Musk, he's been going through it. And there was a press conference last week on Friday during which Musk left the White House. Trump thanked him, said, we're going to stay super close. It was all very amicable, I guess, except for the black eye that Elon had for some reason. But anyway, in the days that have followed, and we're recording on Thursday, June 5th, things have gotten very acrimonious. Musk has been attacking the big, beautiful bill. He's been essentially saying it's full of pork. Trump went off on the Oval Office accusing Elon Musk of having Trump derangement syndrome, which is very funny. And then Musk on Twitter essentially keeping the fight going, saying that Trump wouldn't have got elected without him. So that is going on. And Musk is not the only person who's mad about this. Republicans are mad. Democrats are mad. I thought like one exercise would be to kind of go through what they're mad about. And I think the first one, of course, is the deficit. Do you know off the top of your head how much the deficit bill is going to be if this thing passes?
I do. Yeah. Over the next 10 years, this is always how they calculate these things. The tax bill will add an estimated $4+ trillion to the deficit, which is huge.
Yes. That's like the CBO estimate for the tax part of the bill. The estimates sort of range from, like you said, $4 trillion, maybe down to $2 trillion or so. But the thing is, there are all these temporary tax cuts in this bill, like the no tax on tips.
Yes.
And if those become permanent, then it's up to $5 trillion. So it could actually be greater than even the estimates are saying. And Elon Musk has been on a heater about this. As I said, we've also seen a bunch of Republicans, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, a lot of Wall Street folks. They're all talking about deficits in sort of very dire terms.
Yeah, well, it's all the kind of old school Republicans who are sort of fiscally conservative, small government. This bill is definitely the opposite of that. But it is a tricky situation. In fairness, I think, because the tax cuts, if they expire, we will experience them. Most people did get a tax cut. I mean, it's not quite evenly distributed. So middle class households, that's people making roughly between $75,000 and $200,000, got on average a tax cut of about $1,000 in 2017. And really wealthy people got a tax cut of, on average, like $70,000. But,
cool.
You know, percentage-wise, it was sort of on track. And if you let them expire, most people experience this as a tax hike.
Yes.
And for middle and lower-income families, like $1,000 extra dollars is a big deal. So it's tough.
And if you're rich, $70,000, also big deal. Hold that thought, though, because I want to go through the other two main areas of madness. Okay, so the other one is the actual cuts, right? Although this is a bill that would increase the deficit, they are making some effort to cut things back. And the main way they're doing this is Medicaid. That is the health program that the United States has for poor people. And what is happening is the bill would make it so that there are work requirements for Medicaid, so that people would have to prove that they are working a certain number of hours each month. The challenge here, right, is like, how do you prove it? Is everyone able to like do the requisite paperwork? And there are independent estimates showing that something like 11 million people will lose their health insurance if that happens. Now, that has a bunch of Democrats mad. You could understand that. Democrats, of course, have been historically the party of expanding health insurance with public programs. But many red state Republicans are also mad about this. Josh Hawley, very conservative senator from Missouri, called the idea of cutting Medicaid morally wrong and politically suicidal.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare is already such a huge hot button issue in this country. And Medicaid, in fairness, is one of the bigger expenses in our budget. But even those cuts are not going to make up for how much the bill costs.
And then the last one, now this is more conventional. They're cutting some very specific programs, including these green energy programs, which Trump kind of ran against and hates, but a bunch of Republicans are mad about because their states have benefited from some of these programs.
Elon Musk himself has benefited from a lot of these.
Elon Musk, while he has on one hand sort of wringing his hands about the deficit, his companies, and even he at times, has been sort of complaining that they're losing these tax credits. So he's like talking about quote unquote pork, but like he wants his pork.
Yes. Well, I feel like, honestly, that is the problem that we're running up against with the deficit right now and taxes, is that there is no party, I do not think the Democrats or the Republicans are innocent in this situation, that actually wants to bring the deficit, our debt, under control. Everybody just wants to spend that money in a different way. Even the Democratic proposal, which would keep in place the tax expiration, basically, I think the top 5% would see their tax cuts expire. Like 45% of the cost of the tax bill would go away if you just let the tax cuts expire for like the top 5% of earners. But then the Democratic Party wants to also spend it. Nobody wants to deal with the deficit. Well, that is like the only thing uniting the parties right now.
And it's not just that. It's like no one can even admit that these tax cuts are part of the deficit. You know, over the last couple of days, Musk and his friends and so on are getting mad. And the thing that they're fixating on, I know this is going to send you over the ledge. They're fixating on this part of the debt limit because it raises the debt ceiling to $5 trillion. They're saying, well, we need to pass the tax cuts, but we can't raise the debt ceiling this high. And as you know, that's just incoherent.
That is a constant, huge fight, one that has caused the credit rating in our country to go down because there's such a risk of the U.S. defaulting on its debt. Why would you tie that perennial battle in with something this big? It does not seem like a great move.
Now, this is probably where I should say that the administration has kind of responded. Russell Vought, who's the head of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, he's an administration figure, in a way, an ideological ally of Musk. He went on TV and he tried to make the case that these estimates are just wrong because they are calculating things using this false, ideological math.
When you assume the extension of the president's tax relief from 2017, this budget or this bill, and it's really a reconciliation bill. It's not really a budget bill. It is using a budget process. This is a $1.4 trillion over 10 years deficit reduction.
Well, that's like me saying if I don't count my giant Chase credit card bill, it's just all profit.
One thing I've wondered about, Stacey, is like, if these deficit hawks are right, when do normal people start to notice how bad? Can you make the case that this is actually bad?
I love this question because our country's in like $30 trillion worth of debt right now. And it's like you can't even imagine that amount of money. And it's like, well, I don't know. I just want to live my life and pay my rent. It's like, what does that mean? So I think the real issue here is how expensive it's getting to service the debt. Like the interest we're paying on the debt. Right now, that's the size of the defense budget. But apparently, within a decade, 1/3 of all the taxes we pay are going to go to servicing the debt, which means that's money that can't go to growing our economy or filling potholes or expanding healthcare programs or whatever you'd want to do with that money. It's becomes so unproductive. It would be like all of my income's going to paying my credit card bills. I can't make investments. I can't grow. It starts to really shrink our economy and really cripple the government.
So the issue is that the government loses the ability to do things and then our lives degrade? Or the issue
our economy starts to shrink because it starts to sort of basically become our economy. Servicing the debt becomes our economy.
All right. So let's talk about what you think is going to happen here, or what we think is going to happen. Trump wants this done by July 4th. We're seeing maybe not necessarily great signs that that is going to happen, but I think everyone sort of assumes that these tax cuts at least have to be extended for the reasons that you mentioned, because everyone will be too mad. Jamie Dimon went on Fox Business and he was sort of talking about like how bad these deficits are and the bond market and this and that. And then he basically says, yeah, but we just need the tax cuts to be extended because we need that for the economy and we'll deal with the deficits after we get that done.
I think this is the real issue. No one is dealing with the deficits. I talked with this economist, Jessica Riedel, from the Manhattan Institute, which is a pretty right-of-center think tank. And she says she's been talking to politicians on both sides of the aisle and that the one thing everybody agrees on is that they don't want to deal with this. Here's what she told me.
I brief members of Congress very regularly, and I walk them through the budget slides and the data that our fiscal outlook is unsustainable and we are heading towards a debt crisis that's going to be terrible for the economy. And the response I usually get is, I understand and I agree with everything you have said, but I will lose my seat if I don't keep voting for the gravy train.
Spending money is more fun than not spending money.
So
spending
much fun.
Money greater than not spending money. Always. So, Max, one of the biggest business titans in the country is having a very cool summer. I know you know who I'm talking about because you know a shocking amount about Taylor Swift.
That was Cruel Summer? Was that what you were doing there?
Yeah, I was doing a Cruel Summer Easter egg.
Yeah, this is huge because if you have been following Taylor Swift for the last, 5 years, this battle over her music rights has been kind of the defining artistic thing, even more so than the relationship with Travis Kelce, the breakup with that guy from England, whose name I don't remember. And
Gyllenhaal Gate,
this question of the scarf. It's all kind of subservient to this business question. It's an ideal topic for us on this podcast.
It is. And here to walk us through this whole tortured tale is Lucas Shaw. He covers Hollywood and entertainment for Bloomberg. He writes the excellent newsletter Screen Time. Hey, Lucas.
Thank you for having me.
So Taylor Swift just scored this kind of major business victory. And the winners and losers here were pretty surprising. Taylor has just acquired the rights to her first 6 albums from this private equity group called Shamrock Capital. And that essentially means she controls all of her music and music videos and unreleased works from those albums. So take us back to the beginning here. Where did this bad blood start?
Oh, boy. Well, you could argue that it started the moment she signed her initial deal, which was back in, I want to say like 2006 or something. Just because the way the music industry works, she signed a deal that gave Big Machine, her initial record label, the rights to her first 6 albums. But in the case of this dispute, it really started when Scott Borchetta, who owned Big Machine, decided that it was time to sell because Taylor Swift was leaving. So Taylor Swift finishes those first 6 albums. She was one of the most successful pop stars in the world. 1989, which I believe was the 4th of those 6, but don't hold me to it, had been one of the...
Oh, that's the big one with Shake It Off. And...
Correct. One of the best-selling albums in modern history. And Taylor Swift, having completed that contract, decided that she wanted to own her future work because the way the music business was structured had changed. Historically, labels had really owned and controlled everything. But because of a lot of changes related to the internet in large part, it has become much easier for artists to demand ownership. And she was going to get that in her next deal. She also wanted her previous albums. And so there's a lot of sort of disagreement, I think, about what exactly happened. But what it boils down to is Taylor Swift might have re-signed with Big Machine had she been able to get her first 6 albums back. Scott Borchetta placed some limits on that, like her earning it out by signing new things. Instead, she goes to Universal Music Group, the biggest music company in the world. They say that she will own all of her future work and they just license it back from her for a period of time. And then Scott Borchetta looks at this and says, okay, Big Machine is at its most valuable it's ever going to be because Taylor was her biggest star. I need to sell this. He sells Big Machine to a music mogul manager named Scooter Braun, best known as the guy who found Justin Bieber. And she was not happy about it.
This story, and you just hinted at it, Lucas, it contains multitudes because in addition to having this kind of like history of the music business and how it's changing, there's also the relationship between artists and their fans and the rise of these big fan communities. Lucas, you don't need to give us the whole story, but like, why did artists not own their songs before and why do they own them today?
Well, if you think about it, not just in music, but in most types of art, the creative person is not the person who puts up the money to make it, right? If you think about the movie business, directors, for the most part, do not own their work because they require someone else to put up the capital to make this big movie. The same has been true in the music business, where you have these labels who have generally put up the capital to make the art and also have the infrastructure around it to help distribute and market and all these other things. But that has started to change in part because of when labels sign people, right? It can be much easier to both produce and distribute your work now because of different digital tools that have come about. And so you will often have labels sign people after they've had a song go viral on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. And thus they have a little bit more leverage in those conversations. There are also a lot of other companies that are around offering artists the chance to distribute their work without demanding ownership. There are a lot of companies that say, we'll distribute for a 15% fee and you own the masters and we will try to make money off of that little fee we get. And so there are a lot of artists now who can choose to either go independent or, because they have that option, if they matter enough, will tell the label, I want to own. Now, to the question about why, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? You put your heart and soul into a piece of art and you feel like you should or want to own it. It's also incredibly valuable. We've seen these catalogs trade for millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
I'm just wondering, like, on a practical level, for an artist that doesn't need the money, like Taylor Swift, are there any limitations on her if she doesn't own her songs? Like, can she not perform them? Or I'm just wondering if there's like a practical reason or if it's more of an emotional thing wanting to own your back catalog.
There's some slight limitations. A lot of the limitations have to do actually with the publishing, the songwriting, because Taylor Swift writes almost all of her songs. But there are historically, much as a record label owned the master recording, there has been a music publisher that owns the underlying publishing rights. And you generally can't do public performances without that publishing right. Now, if you're the artist, unless this situation is particularly acrimonious, your publisher's not going to prevent you from doing the things that you want to do. So I don't think it's in her case so much that there are things that she couldn't do, although she has tried to frame it that way in certain circumstances. More so, I think it's just she wants to be able to own it and do what she wants. And her whole messaging throughout the last few years of this process, and frankly, even before then, she has positioned herself as the sort of emblem or totem of artist empowerment. Now, I think some of that, frankly, has been disingenuous because a lot of it has just been about what she wants. She has not sort of, in some of these cases, like won some larger war for the industry, but that is how she's portrayed it.
I have to say, like, I was not that much of a Taylor Swift fan up until this moment.
You and a lot of other people, because she became way more popular during this process.
I was just like, she's taking on the man. And I loved that she fought back and then she kind of won. She re-recorded all these songs. Those songs did great. I just thought it was such a cool thing that she took on the industry and won. It also sort of positioned her as being this amazing business person, or at least that's how it seemed.
I think I see the different transactions a little bit differently, just insofar as
what do you see?
I think that everyone did what you would expect them to do, which was they acted in their own self-interest. So Scott Borchetta got the best deal he could get for his label. Scooter Braun made a very savvy deal for that and then resold it and made a bunch of money from that.
He resold it to private equity, right?
Correct. He sold it to Shamrock. And then Taylor Swift did what was in her interest, which is that she turned this into the single greatest marketing campaign the music business has ever seen. So even though I think Taylor is very adept at manipulating story and narrative, and because people like her and they're
any of her exes.
Yeah, and inclined to not like these other people, she gets them to view things in ways that are like not quite right. Like there's this whole thing where she like claimed Scooter Braun was trying to block her from performing her music at the American Music Awards. That struck me as like total bogus because he doesn't really have the right to do that. That was part of her campaign. But even though I think some of what she has done has been misleading, it has only amplified my respect for her as a business person, because I just think she's incredibly savvy and has been the most impressive, not just artist, but one could argue executive in the music business over the last several years.
What move did she make that hadn't been made before that impressed you?
Well, she weaponized her fans.
Oh, the Swifties.
Yeah. When she initially talked about re-recording her albums, if you talk to most people in the music business, they didn't think this was going to be a big deal. People had re-recorded albums in the past, but she was able to generate interest in those re-records, and she marshaled this rabid fan base in a way that I've really only seen in recent history with some of these Korean acts. But it feels like hers is so much bigger. Maybe BTS was almost as big, but like the people who just really cared about Taylor Swift and followed everything she did and were going to listen to everything and argue about all the different versions. She weaponized her fans in a way that gave her all this power and that really neutralized any of her rivals or enemies.
So Taylor Swift's Eras Tour that you mentioned made, I think, $1 billion.
I think it got to $2 billion.
Got to $2 billion. And also, like, everywhere she went, she was like moving the economic needle, like helping small businesses, GDPs, all of it. Was that directly related to this drama, do you think?
Sort of. Well, because she re-recorded and then re-released all of this early music, it had people listening to it, and it set herself up to do something that is pretty rare for an artist who at the time was like 32, 33. She essentially went on a greatest hits tour.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Each album sort of became a quote unquote era, or a couple of albums became an era, because she's so prolific. She's put out so much new music, and she continued while re-recording to also record new music. I mean, the amount of records she's released over the last 4 or 5 years is really mind-boggling. And so I think it did prime everyone. Her fandom was peaking. She had people listening to the old and to some new music. And it just set up this tour that's unlike anything the world has ever seen. I mean, it's the best-selling tour in the history of the music business by a lot.
Who won?
Yeah, who won the breakup?
So my take on this is that everyone won. She's the biggest winner, but everyone won. Scott Borchetta got paid $300 million for Big Machine, who was already doing fine, but he now has generational wealth. Scooter Braun resold just the Taylor albums for $360 million and then used Big Machine and the rest of his business to sell to the Korean company Hybe, which is the home of BTS, for about $1 billion. So he got stupidly wealthy. Universal Music Group, the biggest music company in the world, signs Taylor Swift away from Big Machine and looks like this very artist-friendly place, even though, keep in mind, they are the largest owner of master recordings in the world. And Shamrock, you know, I don't know that they made a killing on this, but at a minimum, with the way this resolved, Taylor Swift hails them and they're going to go out and buy catalogs and they can say, Taylor, thinks we're great. Why don't you? The only loss in this, there's a little bit of loss of people's perception of reality. And then I do think that from a perception standpoint, like Scooter Braun definitely suffered, right? He became a villain on the internet. And I think there have been some personal results from this for him and his family that have been pretty negative. I think there's been a lot of nastiness directed at them. But if we're just speaking sort of financially and business speaking, everybody won.
'Cause baby, now we got bad blood. You know it used to be mad love. So take a look what you've done. 'Cause baby, now we got bad blood. Hey!
So we are now to the last part of our show where we talk about our underrated story of the week. Max, you found our underrated story. What do you got?
Okay, now I don't want to just be the generational clash reporter here, but I've got a sort of finger-waggy story about bar tabs, Stacey.
Okay.
Basically, according to the New York Times, Gen Z, when they go to the bar, they don't open a tab and just like leave it open until they leave. They buy a drink, pay for it, close the tab, tip the bartender, sign the receipt, and then hang around for a little while, order another drink, open a tab, immediately close it, sign the receipt, pay the tip. And they do that over and over again.
That is the correct way to do that.
Well, listen, the New York Times does not agree. There are lots of people quoted in this story who are horrified. Bartenders don't like it, for one thing, because, if you're working at a bar at a very busy time, this is like slowing you down. This is like a drink that you could be pouring, especially if it's busy. It means that other people have to wait longer. And I think what I detected in this Time story is also sort of a complaint about something being overly transactional. There's a quote from a bartender that said, "These kids never learn the proper way to be a barfly." Now, what was funny about this...
Is that bad? That feels like a feature, not a bug.
What's funny about this story to me is that the Times posited all of these theories for what could be going on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
All right, you want to hear a few of them?
Yes, I do.
All right, so one, and we've talked about this on this show, Gen Z drinks less. This is a great way to avoid over-consuming.
Yeah, because you drink, if the tab's open, you might as well.
Okay, so that's one. Okay. I feel like that makes maybe the most sense. Okay, number 2, commitment issues. Gen Z has trouble.
Not opening a bar tab means you have commitment issues.
According to somebody quoted in the New York Times, basically it's like an echo of our Tinder thing. They're just like not ready to
commit to opening a bar tab.
To be fair, I think it's sort of like not wanting to have to want to leave and fight your way. Okay, here's another theory. Gen Z is more financially literate thanks to the, quote, accessibility of online financial literacy tools. Last one, and this is another head scratcher for me. Gen Z is more introverted. They just don't want to have have that additional social interaction with the bartender. There is one obvious thing that's going on, which is also, to be fair, mentioned in this story, which is that not just Gen Z, but everybody in general does not use cash as much, and younger people especially never use cash.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. The way that you pay for things is different. I actually don't use cards anymore. I pay for stuff with my phone most of the time. And so then you'd have to close out every time. You can't leave your phone open.
I do think most of these things that the Times is talking about, not wanting to deal with the bartender, not wanting to spend too much money, if you were paying with cash, it's very easy to do all these things. You just bring $40 with you to the bar, and when your $40 is done, you leave the bar.
Yeah.
And that's what I did when I was, in my 20s. So I think this is just more a story about payment methods than it is about any cultural norms.
Well, also all of the theories seem to just paint Gen Z in a really good light. They're responsible.
Listeners, how do you pay your bar tab? Let us know. Everybody's at Bloomberg.net. And let us know what you're watching in the tax bill or what's happening in Washington, what stories we should be talking about next week. This show is produced by Stacey Wong. Magnus Hendrickson is our supervising producer, Amy Keene our editor, and Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer. Dave Purcell handles fact-checking, and Blake Maples is our engineer. Special thanks to Angel Rosillo, Jennifer Mast, and Jeff Muskus. Sage Bauman heads Bloomberg Podcasts. If you have a minute, please rate and review our show. It means a lot to us.
And if you do, Max will send you a personalized haiku on the economic and business topic of your choice. We need to offer this as an economic show. We have to offer people an economic incentive.
Fine. Fine. I agree.
Really?
I agree to this.
Haiku?
If you have a story that should be our business, email us at everybodies@bloomberg.net. We will read it and we will respond. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.